You know who you should be. You know you need to be healthier. But how? As one author put it, information is the gunpowder of the mind. And here to give us some of that gunpowder is Dr. Joan Ifland, who has a PhD in addictive foods, addictive nutrition, and an MBA from Stanford. And we are here to discuss diet-related recovery, nutrition, what's wrong with the American diet. We're going to touch on all of that. And Dr. Joan Ifland, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I am thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. My first question is, what is a food addict, or who is a food addict rather, and what is it?
So, food addiction occurs when the craving part of the brain has been sensitized, and it just has this tendency to flood the brain with cravings. So it's a very particular part of the brain. And those cravings are so powerful that they override the rational thought in the frontal lobe. So you can think about it as like two armies battling, your frontal lobe, but battling the craving pathways. But in our culture, the reason why 83% of Americans are overweight or obese, and 93% of Americans have a metabolic diagnosis. 93% of Americans are over the age of 20. And why Americans are eating 73% of their food in processed foods. It's because the tobacco industry bought Kraft Nabisco and General Foods and eventually Dannon Yogurt in the 1980s. And they have a business model. The business model is a model that was developed for substances that can hyperactivate cravings, create these really powerful cravings, but they don't have any other redeeming qualities. So cigarettes, alcohol, video games, vaping, cannabis, all of those industries are craving industries. There's no inherent value. In fact, they're quite destructive in value in their products. And so they're selling the products based on the ability to trigger greater cravings than a rational thought. So rational thought is, I don't need that. It's going to give me lung cancer, whatever. But the cravings, the nicotine cravings, will override that. It's a mechanical thing. Either the craving pathways are putting out more neurotransmitter, they're traveling over here to the behavior centers, or the frontal lobe is putting out more neurotransmitter. It's a competition for how many neurotransmitters are going to reach those behavior centers. And then how would somebody know that they're suffering from this? I think this is probably, you're just starting out with the most valuable thing that somebody could get out of this session, which is this why I'm overeating? Is this why I have diabetes or obesity or depression or anxiety? And there are about 20 chronic illnesses that are affected by processed foods. You take the processed foods out and these illnesses go away. We just got a patent. We were awarded a patent for a method to put about 20 different chronic illnesses into remission because we know how to stop the processed foods. So if you like, I can run down the 11 kind of signs of that the tobacco industry has succeeded in getting your cravings to override your frontal lobe. There are 11 signs. I can run through them if you like.
Would you please? Yes.
Okay. So number one is called unintended use. And it means that you have a plan to use XYZ amount, but you use more. So you wake up, today I'm going to eat really good. And by 10 o'clock, you're in front of a vending machine. or I'm going to lose weight and you can't. Unintended use can be, I'm going to drive straight home from work, but you stop at the fast food place. Or you drive into the gas station. I am not going inside there. I'm just getting my gas, but you have this feeling. It's like being a zombie. And your frontal lobe is screaming, no, 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 we said we weren't going in there. But the craving pathways have been triggered and they're pumping out cravings and they're just literally controlling behavior. That's not being weak-willed. That's being manipulated by the tobacco industries and this cravings business model. Number 2 is failure to cut back. I saw a study the other day that following weight loss, in the year following a weight loss program, only 1% of the participants were happy with the way they were maintaining the weight loss. So that means 99% of people who go through weight loss are then struggling to maintain. That's failure to cut back. Number 3 is time spent. And it's not just time spent going and getting, going back and forth from your desk to the breakout room, or, inventing an excuse for an errand and then going to all the fast food places. It's not just going between the TV and the kitchen all night. It's also thought time. So cravings demand brain time, that you're thinking about food all the time. You're obsessing about food. At some point, you can't think of anything else. It gets worse over time. So time spent is number 3, and it includes time spent thinking about it. Number 4 is cravings, and we have research showing that cravings intensify with BMI, so that 83% of the population who have overweight, obesity, or severe obesity are suffering from cravings. Number 5 is failure to fulfill roles. You're too big to get down on the floor with your kids, but you're still eating. You are too depressed to apply for a promotion, or you're too distracted to apply for a promotion, but you're still eating. So you're not fulfilling the roles. You can't get through school because you can't stop eating, but you're still eating. Number 6 is relationship problems. Somebody wants you to stop eating and you can't, or you can't really maintain a great relationship because as you're talking to somebody, you're thinking about the chocolate cake that you hid in the laundry room. You can't wait for your partner to go to bed so that you can binge on something. Those are all indications of relationship problems. The next one, number 7, is activities given up. You used to go to bowling, or you used to go to the civic meeting. But now when you're driving home, you just want to go home. You're craving, you want to eat something, you want to eat it in private. You don't want to be around people. You don't want to go anywhere because you've gained weight and you don't want people to see that. There's a lot of shame attached to this loss of control. The next one is hazardous use. And people think of drunk driving, that's hazardous use. But people are driving, with their elbows as they pull out of fast food places to get everything else in their mouths. They may be so big that they can't see their feet anymore, but they're still eating. They're tripping over things because they can't see their feet. They could be diabetic, and they know that if they eat this processed food, that they could spike their glucose numbers, but they're still eating. So it's, about these things, but you're still eating. The next one is use in spite of knowledge of consequences. You go back to the 93% of Americans over the age of 20 have one or more of these diagnoses: high triglycerides, high blood glucose, high blood pressure, or high fat tissue on their bodies. And they're still eating. So they have a diagnosis, a diet-related diagnosis. They've probably been told, cut back on XYZ, and they're not cutting back. The next one is tolerance or progression, and they're eating more and more of these substances over time. And that's really chilling because there's a group of researchers who track the consumption, particularly of these processed foods, and they just track it over decades that Americans are eating a greater and greater percentage of their food in processed foods. It's chilling. It's scary. And then the last one is withdrawal. And withdrawal is when you're eating not because you're hungry. You're eating because you want to avoid a headache or anger or depression or fatigue or stomach ache. And that's withdrawal avoidance. And that's, we have some good documentation on that from the keto community because that's a clean food plan and they go through withdrawal when they're getting on keto. It's so pronounced, it's called keto flu. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, all of those things that you were just listing, I can definitely resonate with a few of those.
Yeah. And if you have 6 or more, it's a severe. You have severe cravings. Yeah. There's a reason why Americans are eating 73% of their food in processed foods. These are the addictive foods. It's the sugars, flour, it's gluten, excessive salt, dairy, excessive fat, and caffeine. And then when you combine them into ultra-processed foods, they're really craving because they're activating the dopamine and the serotonin and the opioid and the cannabinoid pathways, which are activated by alcohol and morphine and cannabis. So you have all your craving pathways firing at the same time. It's why the U.S. is so sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed on your website, it says that you adopt drug and alcohol addiction recovery methods. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and why those recovery methods are the necessary ones?
Yeah, because this is the work of the tobacco industry. They got 2/3 of Americans to smoke at the height of smoking. Millions of Americans have died from lung cancer as a result. They have a particular business model. It's a deceptive it's 5 A's. I call it the 5 A's. Deceptive advertising, like they made cigarettes sexy. Cigarettes are like the most not sexy thing you can imagine.
Oh, they're not.
But they succeeded in that.
Mm-hmm.
They hid addictive substances. They hid extra nicotine and extra pyrosine in the products. They advertised to children, so young age. They had cigarette commercials on the Flintstones cartoons.
Right.
They created a cartoon character, Joe Camel, to appeal to 10-year-old boys. And then when tobacco came in their internal documents, it explicitly describes adapting the Marlboro Country Store, which is an addiction development mechanism. They just took that lock, stock, and barrel and made it into the Kool-Aid wacky warehouse. And to addict children, sugar's been shown to be more addictive than cocaine. And there they are, enticing children to try it again and again with coupons that then they could send in and get free triggers. So you had your Kool-Aid watch, and every time you looked at it, it would trigger these cravings. It would signal for cravings release. It's just diabolical. And then lots of availability. So as they were taking out the cigarette vending machines, they were putting in snack and soda machines. And affordability. And it's the affordability piece. You got to have all 5 of those pieces. They were good at 4 of them. And then in 1980, high fructose corn syrup came on the market. And finally, they had their 5th one, which is affordability. because they couldn't really get started by being dependent on the sugar cartel in Florida. It's too expensive, and they didn't want to be, beholden to the sugar cartel. But bang, once high fructose corn syrup came on the market, they were good to go. High fructose corn syrup goes through the body like corn alcohol. It's very addictive, and it's very fattening. High fructose corn syrup converts to fat 2.5 times more efficiently than sugar.
Wow.
And, the soda companies just looked at that and said, oh, well, let's replace sugar with high fructose corn syrup and, double our advertising budget. The history is just, you kind of,
Yeah, I can tell it's disturbing, and it really does require drastic measures in the same way that somebody recovering from alcohol needs.
I started into this field 29 years ago when I got off of sugars and flours, and my cravings went away for the first time in my life. The bloating went away. This is all like within 4 days. It's very quick. The body comes back very quickly. The bloating went away, the fatigue went away, the brain fog went away, the cravings went away. I lost 2 pounds without even thinking about it that first week. The next week, I noticed a sinus infection cleared up, and the allergies were getting better. In the third week, I noticed I wasn't raging. I wasn't yelling at my family. I wasn't criticizing. And these are things that I had been doing therapy and women's groups and 12-step groups to try to get them to stop, and boom. It was the food. It was particularly the refined carbohydrates, the sugar and flour. And that's what got me into this 29 years ago. So now I've earned a PhD, and I've written a textbook. So
Yeah,
there
can you
is a
see it?
textbook in this field. Here it is, Processed Food Addiction. It's a huge book, but it is on Amazon, and you can get it on Kindle. So what I learned from all of that is just what you've hit on right at the beginning of this discussion, which is great, that now this is pretty deeply embedded in most people's brains. Most people are suffering from this severely. In 2020, the first year of COVID, when 300,000 Americans died from COVID, 1.7 million Americans died of diet-related diseases. So this is life or death. And if you're, the fact that it starts in early childhood, and there are all 4 of the craving pathways are involved, you can't just do this at home. And then right at about the same time that the textbook came out, the same month as a matter of fact, we began our first programs on Zoom. And what you really need in order to beat this is you need to feel normal while you're doing it. It's something that nobody has really gotten, that if you're going to not eat processed foods, you're not going to be like anybody around you, and you cannot participate in the most important bonding, community, family rituals, because they're all around food now. So you have to be able to eat clean, eat only real food, and feel normal. So what do our programs do? We're live with live hosts over Zoom 15 hours out of every 24. 15 hours out of every 24. And that's around the clock. As when we started building this 7 years ago, people signed up from all over the world. And now we have them trained. They're trained peer support. And they host it. The Australians are on in the middle of the night. The Europeans and South Africans are on, in the early hours of the morning. And then we come across the Americas. So we're on 24 hours a day. which is really important because a lot of distress occurs at night. And in New York, you can open up your screen, get on Zoom, and people will be speaking your language. They understand what's going on with you. They have tremendous compassion. They'll agree and affirm this is not your fault. This is a business model consequence. And they might have an Australian accent, but they're in your community.
So, can I ask about that?
Yeah.
So, this is people who maybe during dinner time they can open up and commune with somebody so that they can feel like, we're in this together type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense because if you want to get away from processed food, it's really hard,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you might be the only one in your social circle who is trying
Yeah.
to do this.
The only one in your social circle, the only one at your faith organization, the only one at your workplace. And then your kids are trying to get through school. I sent lots and lots of food with my kids. They went to a girls' school, so they were kind of admired. They were thought to have been on a diet. But there was another kid in their school who really wanted to do this, and her mother just wouldn't have it. So, when my kids got off the processed foods, their grades went up. They became popular because their personalities were really stable. They were always in a good mood and confident. Their artistic abilities went up. Their sports abilities went up. And they ended up getting into really good universities in a couple of years when it was really hard. And then the competition was quite fierce. So this is life-changing for children. But I developed a routine where I sent food, and they left the house in the morning. They had a disposable bag, so plastic bag, of all the food that they would need. So they never would have to choose between eating something that would make them crazy or going hungry. It's the kind of length that you have to go to. And it does bring up, in our programs, we're teaching 150 skills. So it is like, how do you go to a social event and come home without lapsing? How do you make all this food? Because restaurant food, even if it looks clean, they're not going to have good quality oils in it. And it's going to have extra salt in it. So you just food production skills. And then there's about half of those 150 skills that we teach are how to avoid being triggered. So we're in this culture that has been blanketed with food stimulation. Availability is stimulating. Cheap prices is stimulating. You can't go into a grocery store. Most grocery stores only have about 1% real food. 1%. So you're being triggered by the sound, the smell, not just that, but everybody else has got processed foods in their carts and you don't. So it's the business cueing, the business stimulation, craving stimulation, but then also emotions, good or bad, will stimulate craving. So you have to learn a lot of emotional control. Stress will trigger cravings. So like stress, staying calm in all situations is really important. Relationship stress is a leading cause of lapsing. So we teach a lot of relationship management, how to be happy with somebody, even when their behavior might not be what you would hope for. So I kind of glanced at this recently, and I thought, about half of these skills that we teach are about protecting the brain from being triggered. And this goes back to why this is not your fault. I say this all the time. I want people to know that these decades of struggle, all the thousands of dollars you've spent on programs, that you have never failed. The programs were broken before they started. And this is why we have a patent on our program. We're the only ones who figured out, one study at a time. That textbook cites 2,000 studies. So you just, over these 29 years, I started reading research 20 years ago. Over these 20 years, it's just like a huge jigsaw puzzle. You put this piece here, and that study goes there. And this one, oh, you put those two studies together, you have a new finding. Trauma. Oh my gosh. I mean, people are so traumatized. They might have been raised by people who were emotionally unstable, because that's what processed foods do. They create highs and lows, depression, anxiety, anger, and shame, but chemically induced, because your blood sugar is too high or it's too low, or your craving pathways are using up all the blood flow in your brain. These are things that cause mood disorders. And the good news is that they go away. They really get much better. And that's what happened to me 29 years ago with the raging depression, anxiety. Just I noticed after about 3 weeks that it was much, much better. So you need to be in a community, but you need to be in a community that's highly skilled. You can't go into a community that's run by amateurs. Well, I did it this way, so you're going to do it this way. You got to be really, really careful. It's not just a waste of time, where some of these help groups are free, but they're not free in terms of your trauma, because you go into them, they don't work, they blame you, they make you sit in the back of the room if you have a lapse. No, they're not free. They hurt. So, I mean, I'm very proud to say that based on these 20 years of research, and my dad was a very meticulous researcher. He worked for a consumer goods company. They didn't have a suit. They didn't lose a negligent suit for the whole time he was there, because he was so meticulous about research. You have to show negligence. And they just couldn't pin it on him. So I don't go anywhere without a study. And I love reading research. It all works out. But yeah, there's now an answer. So thank you, Matthew, for asking. It's not expensive. I can't leave. I don't want to leave, because I don't want that pull to feel normal to be taken over by the outside culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that's one thing, like you touched on a good point. The same tactics that the tobacco industries were using, and they have well-funded scientific research on how to get people addicted to things, and they transitioned right into the foods, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And to some degree, people are unaware of this, and they're manipulated into being addicted to food.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this with my own personal journey. I was always involved athletically in sports and fairly active, so I was always like athletically in decent shape. But man, when I think to just the cravings that I have and trying to break those, and I'm still not perfect, but I've made a lot of improvements. And it did come after I got married, because, when you're in a home and you spend more time with somebody else, and hey, maybe you take up cooking together or something like that. And so
Yeah.
I think that's half the battle, maybe just cooking your own food.
The
But
chewing, the triggering, the food stimulation inside the home is where to start.
yes.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I have those moments where you just want something salty, or you just want something crunchy.
Mm-hmm.
Even it could be after you just ate a full meal.
Yeah.
But there's for some reason, and I think it has to be psychological, or like there's some sort of biochemical chain
It's
reaction in my
neurochemical.
brain.
Yeah, that the industry has sensitized those craving pathways. So it's very easy for the brain to trickle out cravings and then more cravings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mechanical problem. They created that sensitivity through repeat use and lots of blanket stimulation. It's
Yeah.
not your fault.
And, I think that is true to some degree. And the one thing I have been really good about cutting out is candy.
Good.
I work at a high school and the kids are always eating candy.
Oh my
They have
gosh.
candy all the time and they'll offer me a Starburst or something. And I can honestly look at a Starburst and I don't think I would eat it for $20, $25. I don't think you could pay me, maybe I'd probably do it for $100, but like $20, I don't think I would do it to eat a Starburst. So
That's
I've done a
great.
really good job cutting, breaking that off. But it's
Yeah.
usually like those cookies, brownies, and let me ask you: do you think it's okay to indulge every now and then if you have experience and training and the education to live healthily 95% of the time?
It depends on the individual. So this is deadly, right?
Mhm.
1.7 million Americans died from this in 2020. So you have to look at your own risk profile. And if that one bite is going to set off cravings that lead to years and years of binging, then no, it's not worth it. Not going to work. But if you're in a community and you have relapse recovery skills, and it's easy to open your screen. When you open your screen and you come into community, you're getting something called an oxytocin release. It's another body chemical. It's kind of like the friendly chemical or the community chemical. It's a signal to your body to kind of relax. You're at home. You're safe. If you could open your screen and start to engage with people in your community who don't eat it, who understand the consequences of it, who have control over it, and you feel normal. That's it. This is what is so just diabolically hard. And you're describing it perfectly because there are two forces at work. One is the cravings, but the other back here in the survival brain is the urge to fit in, to belong, to be normal. Why? Why is that back in the survival brain? Because we're relatively small mammals. We can be eaten by a lot of other animals. There are a lot of other animals, herd animals, pack animals that can take us down and have us for lunch. But if we're in a group, almost no animals can kill us. So the safety is in the group. The safety is in the group. Survival's in the group. You're always tuned in. You know where your tribe is. You know where those individuals are. You know which way to run if the hyenas come out of the grass. We are hardwired all throughout the brain. So even the new parts of the brain have this network called mirror neurons. They're brain cells that do one thing and they copy. They copy, they copy, they copy. So if you are in a community and your mirror neurons are copying, I eat clean, I eat real food, I know the consequences, I've got lots of other things to do with my life, then you're okay. But if you're out there on your own and you're in a group where people are eating processed foods, you run a very interesting risk. If you don't eat the processed foods with them, you can trigger that survival brain into panic. Like you go somewhere and you don't eat the food, you're driving home and you're panicked. Survival brain, you didn't eat that food. Everybody else was eating. You didn't eat. It will make you drive into a fast food restaurant. So it's not just the craving pathways that can get control of these behavior centers. The survival brain can do that as well. And sometimes I hear people say to me, I did so great for 5 years. My diabetes went away. My heart disease went away. My stomach never hurt. My joints stopped hurting. I was cheerful. The depression, anxiety went away. And then I went to a wedding. Typically, it's a wedding where it's high emotion. Everybody else is eating the cake. You've been triggered by the sight of the cake for 5 hours now, and they just eat the cake. They lose their mind. And then they can't get back. And I might be talking to them 10 years later. I had those 5 years. But here's what, it wasn't the addiction that is preventing them from going back. I mean, yes, it is. It's this survival brain saying, nope, 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 you're not going to be abnormal again. We're not going to let you be abnormal. We're just not going to let that happen. So if you're at that wedding and you're feeling super abnormal because everybody is eating the cake, plus you've got all these cravings now, it could be a good decision to eat the cake so that you go home, okay, I had the cake, everybody had the cake, but I'm going to go home and open my screen and remind myself that my tribe doesn't eat that. I was with some other tribe over the weekend. I ate the cake. You might go through withdrawal. You might get a headache. But I'm going to open my screen and just remind every mirror neuron in every part of my body, every part of my brain, that we don't eat that. Now, if you have that, that's one thing. But if you're just going to your body's so excited because now you're normal and you're driving home from the wedding and there's the donut shop and there's the fast food and there's the bakery. Your brain is going to be so happy that you're normal now that it's going to drive you into those places. And you don't know when you're going to get back, and you don't know if you'll die before you get back.
Yeah, I think the concept of having community is really important and going through it with somebody. I'm fortunate where, my mom struggles with diabetes, and it sort of has inspired our whole family to eat healthier and
Super.
really research. And so we have what even better, we're in person kind of doing this together. But I do sort of see, and this is a cause for excitement for people who care about this stuff, is I see various communities taking an interest in eating healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I think in certain Christian religious circles, there is somewhat of an awakening, especially if they're in their older 20s or 30s, and they are listening to certain media online, because there's a lot of information out there now talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
And people can now take a video of themselves, and they have 100,000 followers, and they say, look, why are they putting yellow number 5 in Cheez-Its or whatever it is? And now that information can get blasted out, and people can have access to that, and it sends them on a rabbit hole of digesting information. And so people who have a vested interest in having a good life, a life of abundance and health, I see them adopting longer time horizons. So they're able to delay their gratification in the present moment in order to enjoy a longer, more longevity. And I do see people who are in various circles, and especially like faith-based groups, like at my church. I wouldn't say everybody is characterized this way, but there is a good portion of those with young kids who are sort of, they're hitting all those boxes. They have young family, they're active online, or they're at least getting the right information, and they want to be healthier. And so now they're reading food labels, they're subscribing to healthy food catalogs, and they're talking now. Even though it was not the faith-based thing that brought them together, but they have a lot of these desires in common, and so it's leading them to make better decisions about what they eat.
Yeah. I think what's happening is that the dividing line has become starker. If you're eating processed foods, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have anger issues, you have fatigue, you have brain fog, you have excessive fat tissue on your body, your stomach hurts all the time, you have asthma, you're inflamed. Processed foods are inflammatory. You're tired. You're isolated. And so the difference between that life and a life of vibrancy, where you're consistently happy and you're energetic and you're vigorous and you're strong, you're physically strong, and you're not in pain, it's quite a drastic dividing line.
Mm-hmm.
I love that your church is talking about this. I actually, this coming year, 2025, is going to be our year of workplace consulting and faith organization consulting. So all those 150 skills, you're lucky because you're in a community, an important community. Or if people are eating real food in there, you have a running chance. The skill building, there are things that we can do to help a faith organization do this well for all their members. So you're talking about a subset of the members, the 20, 30 somethings, small children. But what's really heartbreaking is when the older members develop the heart disease, they have a heart attack, they have stroke, or they lose a limb, to a diabetic amputation, or they're going blind from diabetes, or they're just tired, or their joints hurt. That's the aging population is a very vulnerable, very heartbreaking population. I know that at age 73, I just don't have an old person's profile. I have some asthma from extended childhood trauma, which I'm whittling down. It's getting better and better. I don't have anything else.
No.
And it worries my doctor. Can we just put you on something? Yeah, I'll lose my license. So most people are making this dreadful mistake of thinking that joint pain is normal. Fatigue is normal as you age. Depression is normal as you age. And none of that is true. It's because you just have additional years of using processed foods and your body is suffering from it more and more every year. Aging is a myth.
I would like to ask you about the baby steps. Let's pretend we have a 33-year-old male, who eats out every day, goes to Wendy's for lunch, goes to McDonald's for dinner. You open up the fridge, maybe there's some Coca-Cola, and is overweight. What is, the Dave Ramsey baby step number one, right? What is baby step number one?
Get a crock pot.
My wife loves our crock pot. I'll say that.
I got an Instapot last year. I don't know why I waited so long. But yeah, I mean, I work at home, but I get attached to this computer sometimes at the beginning of the day. I have a 1 hour break at lunch, and then I'm on until 4 or 5 o'clock. So I've got all these ways. You just take a package of chicken parts, dump it in the slow cooker part, dump in a bag of carrots, put in a half cup of rice, or chop up a sweet potato. Don't have time to chop up the sweet potato? Just stick it in there. And when you get home at night, you've got dinner. So this is really helpful. You're driving along and the fast food is just screaming. But you say, no, I got food at home. I got food at home. I got food at home waiting for me. I got food at home. That will sometimes really help people get home. And then you have I have jars, canning jars. I give myself dinner, and then I put another serving in a jar, and then it's ready to go with me for lunch the next day. I'll eat it for breakfast. I'm way beyond needing a different kind of meal for breakfast. If I have a really good soup or really good stew, I don't mind having that for breakfast. So making food available in your household. But, there is another answer, Matthew, which is your baby step number one is to find 5 people to do this with so that you are taking care of not just the craving brain, but the survival, you got to feel normal brain. And it only takes 5 people.
Yeah, I think the crock pot is great advice, and I really would suggest anybody do that. And you can look up any number of recipes that are online, but finding somebody, whether it's at work, and I'm hard pressed to believe that like somebody would not be willing to do, like if you have a coworker or a friend and you come up to them and honestly say, hey, look, I notice you are eating healthy and it looks like you work really hard at this, and man, I would love to just learn from you and maybe communicate about this. If they're anybody worth spending time with or being an acquaintance of, that person will probably say yes. I can think of a handful of people who I work with who I'm not that, connected with, but we could at least do that.
Yeah.
Hey, what'd you bring for lunch today? Oh, great. Hey, did you have time to run to the grocery store and stay out of the center aisle? Did you stick around the produce section and, the butcher and things like that?
So this is why I'm so excited about the workplace wellness consulting. I did a lot of research this year, read a lot of research. No workplace wellness programs are reducing healthcare costs. They're all at such a superficial level, and they're not at the root cause of healthcare costs. And this is where my old MBA comes in. We're going to tip this in workplaces. Because when you get into a workplace, it's the only place where the money is on the right side of the table. So we can of course we can reduce healthcare costs because we're at the root cause. It's cravings for processed foods. It's this tobacco style marketing. And it's just lack of knowledge. People don't know that these chronic diseases are being caused by processed foods. So it's a lot of education, just awareness. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Well, and then the next piece is that you can put these chronic diseases into remission. Your doctor who is, trained by the pharmaceutical companies is going to tell you, oh, you're going to have this for life and you're going to have to be on this medication for life. That's not true. It's not true at all. These doctors don't have training in how to get to that root cause, how to quell, how to quiet the cravings, and how to give somebody control. It's an immersion program, or it's a church program where everybody else is doing it. But the workplace, you're there 8 hours. And even if you're working remotely, people are talking and their side conversations. So common knowledge in a workplace, oh, this is why I'm tired. This is why we have productivity issues. This is why we have absenteeism. This is why we have presenteeism, where people are present, but they're really too sick to work. And this is why our healthcare costs are out of control. So this is the only group of people who are going to be deeply, deeply rewarded by letting this common knowledge. And now your mirror neurons are fine. Oh, this is what we do at work. This is the way we dress at work. This is the way we treat each other at work. This is the way we eat. And now your mirror neurons are totally satisfied. Oh, yeah, this is normal. We do it at work. It's totally normal. So if anybody is listening and they have their own business, especially and they're paying those healthcare costs out of pocket because premiums are, health insurance is kind of a myth. You're just paying somebody to process your employees' claims. They're not going to take a loss. If your employees get sicker, well, your premiums are going to go up. They're in the business to be profitable themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So as your employees' health improves and your healthcare costs go down, that is money in the pocket of the business.
Yeah. So food addiction resets. Dr. Joan Ifland. Really looking forward to hearing more about how that evolves and the
Yeah, invite me back. Invite me back. We
Would
might
love to
have a
have you
big
back.
story.
Before we get going, let's pretend like what are the top 3 foods and or beverages? Let's give people some actionable steps. What are the top 3 actionable steps, like 3 foods or beverages that they could just stop eating or drinking immediately?
The question you're asking is which addictive ingredient would be best to give up first?
Okay.
Because you don't say oh, stop smoking crack, but you can still snort it. No, crack is crack, cocaine is cocaine. So sugar is sugar is sugar, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or molasses or turbinado or natural or agave or stevia or any of those, they will all, as soon as they hit that taste bud, they will create an explosion of cravings. So that's the crack of processed foods. But, an easy thing to do is to say that if it has a label, if it has a list of ingredients, don't buy it. If it's in a package, don't buy it. And then number 2 is going to be flour, especially flour that contains gluten. Once you're not eating flour and sugar, you've also eliminated all the additives. We don't know what the additives are doing. But surprisingly, this might surprise you, my 3rd category would be dairy. So dairy has casomorphine in it. It's designed right out of the cow, the organic cow. That calf is drinking that milk, and then 2 things are happening. 1, the calf goes to sleep because it needs to absorb the nutrients. Well, there's a natural morphine in dairy. It's called casomorphine. And there are 4 kinds in dairy, and one of them, beta casomorphine, has been shown to activate the same brain cells as morphine. So it's highly addictive. But here's the second part, which is it turns on the weight gain gene. That baby cow is supposed to gain 500 pounds in a year. So dairy is like the worst things. If somebody said, here, I'm going to give you a cup of dairy or I'm going to give you a cup of, something with sugar in it, I take the sugar. Dairy is really, it's mind numbing. We know it's a numbing substance. I can't think after having dairy, and it'll last 10 days, whereas the ill effects of sugar will last 4 days. So actually dairy is higher on my list of, I am not eating that. And I know everybody knows about sugar, but I don't think most people know about dairy. But if you don't know about dairy and you don't know about excessive fat, this is what happens on keto food plans. People get off the sugar flour. They're so excited. They don't have the cravings, but they didn't get the training. They didn't get the 150 skills to control cravings, to control triggering, to control that stimulation. They didn't learn how to protect their brains from craving stimulation. They're still being manipulated by the food industry. And they'll slide right over into excessive fat. They'll be eating bags of pork rinds or pepperoncini sticks. They'll be eating, all the fat on their steak, and then they'll be eating high-fat dairy. And then they're sick again because the sugar cravings haven't actually gone away. They're incubating. And they will pop up again in 4 months or 6 months. And now you have a combination addiction, the sugar-fat addiction, which is much worse. It's activating more pathways more fiercely than either one alone.
I have heard of that. that sugar with high fat is not good.
Oh my gosh.
I've heard there's some diet coaches online who I listen to their content every now and then, and maybe they'll advocate for carnivore diets or keto diet or paleo, whatever it is, and that is something they've mentioned. I don't know if they would quite agree with the fat thing entirely, but it is interesting to think about, and how you don't want to be a slave to anything.
Well, you don't want the addiction to transfer. That was the other
Sure.
thing that happened in the 1980s is people were giving up cigarettes, but they weren't addressing the cravings, nicotine cravings. And there was the tobacco companies all dressed up as processed foods, ready to profit from addiction transfer,
Yeah.
cravings transfer from nicotine and pyrazine straight over to sugar, flour, fat.
Yeah. Wow. So your book is called Processed Food Addiction.
Yep.
And do you mind holding it up one more time for the people
It's
that?
on Amazon.
Okay.
It's a really heavy duty textbook,
Yeah, it looks heavy
but
duty.
you can get it on Kindle for a pretty reasonable amount. I recommend getting it on Kindle because of the 2000 studies. You can see the research on anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any question you have, you'll see the research on it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I just really want to sincerely thank you for your time.
Thanks
It's
for
been a
having
wonderful
me.
conversation, and maybe we
Yeah.
can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Great day.
Take care, Matthew.
You too.